Welcome to Syntax. Today we got a potluck episode for you today, which is you bring the questions, we bring the answers. Today we've got some really good questions on what do I do about 8,000 ESLint errors, some updates on the video podcast. Does anyone use the HTML time tag anymore? How do you figure out what the hell is in a 7 meg React bundle? That and more. My name is Wes Boss. I'm a developer for Canada, and with me, as always, is Mr. Scott Tolinsky. How you doing today, Scott?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Little sleepy from kids, but yesterday we had the Terminal versus Laracon basketball game. Scott and I were the what do you call that? Commentators.
Yeah, we were both doing color. I don't think either of us was a play-by-play. I think we were both kind of taking both the color commentary and the play-by-play role.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. I think it was just kind of a competition as to who could make each other laugh more, which was great. I think that's the best way to do it.
That's what I was surprised. I went on Twitter after we had done it, and people were just quoting all the jokes that we had, which was great to see. You know what also is great to see? Sentry is great to see.
Wes, you could have said what's great to see is no errors in my Sentry because I fixed them all.
That's what I was going to say. Well. When your error log is empty. What the hell is Sentry? Sometimes you go to a website and that website is broken. You know, you click a button, nothing happens. What happens? That information about what's going wrong gets sent to Sentry, and it gets compiled with a whole bunch of information. We're gonna have an episode on this as well shortly, which is like all of the information about the different browsers. Hold on, let me see if I can focus it here. All the different browsers, how often it's been happening, where in the world, what users it's happening to, all the information that helps you fix your bugs. Check it out at sentry.io/syntax.
Sick.
All right. We got a potluck for you today. You want to grab the first question here?
Yeah, first question from Old Man Yells at Cloud. Hi guys, feedback regarding the video podcast. In my opinion, some of the episodes do not work well as a hybrid. I consume podcasts solely while driving, doing the dishes, doing sports, etc., and some of the episodes are really hard to follow. I don't want to kill the video podcast, but maybe think about making some episodes video only so you can really use the fact that you show code and not have to think about audio-only listeners. Maybe you could add video in the title or something. Just my thoughts. Love the show. Been listening since episode 1. Old Man Yells at Cloud. Yes. You are not the first person to give us this feedback. We've gotten this feedback from, not only, longtime fans of the show, new fans of the show, just people who have been listening to the audio cast, especially with some of the CSS episodes we've been doing lately. It is hard when you start to follow or when you start to do video podcasts and you start to put code up on the screen. It's hard to think about it as like, what are the audio people thinking when they're not seeing the code? So we're definitely going to take this feedback and adjust to it. So, if we are showing code or whatever, I think that's going to be at the utmost important to us to make sure that the audio cast isn't ruined. So if you're out there and you're feeling the same way, just know that you are not alone. We will adjust here, and it's something that we're getting used to. We've only been showing code for, a month or two now, and even then it's not every episode. So it's a skill we're building, and I think you are dead on. I totally agree with you and anybody out who's feeling like that. We will adjust. So we're going to talk about it tomorrow a little bit more, I think, but got to figure out how to maybe some of them just need to be on YouTube, not necessarily part of the podcast, or I don't know. We'll certainly figure that out, and we appreciate everyone's feedback. And if any of you listening do have any other feedback on top of that, please shoot it to us. You can throw it in the potluck question. You can send us a DM. You can send us an email, whatever it is you like to get in touch. Next question we have here is from Omar. Before, small and many NPM packages were considered a benefit. Frameworks like Angular were looked down upon because they had batteries included, but now developers want fewer packages with more functionality. Why has this perception changed? Will it change again in the future? So that was the big thing in Node.js land. Ryan Dahl was he piloted a lot of this, is that small packages that do one thing and one thing well, and you sort of just pull them all together. That's the JavaScript community. And recently, a lot of people are saying, you know what? No, maybe I want standard lib in Node to have absolutely everything. Maybe I do want a framework that makes all the decisions for me. So what has changed? I think that the JavaScript ecosystem has matured to a point where we are realizing that
too much of these wiring it up together is too tricky to maintain and too hard to build integrations when you don't know what absolutely everybody is doing. So a good example is Gatsby. Gatsby had this amazing ecosystem of plugins. I personally had probably 30 different plugins, adapters, different things for my Gatsby website. And then after a couple years, half of them weren't maintained. There was a bunch of churn. They didn't work with different versions of Gatsby. And it was just like, Gatsby did an awesome job at like bringing the popular ones in under their wings and officially maintaining them. But it just starts to rot and nothing works together really well. And you're just tired. We're tired at a certain point and you want it to work together.
There's reasons why it rots, though. It's I don't know if framework, I mean, I'm sure they are, but framework authors, they tend to think that their next big update is going to fix the platform. But if it splinters enough and then all of a sudden you have a big V2 or something and none of your plugins work anymore, that can just kill your entire plugin ecosystem overnight, really. It's a tough balance. And I'm going to state for the record that I've always been for the batteries included. And my first big dive into JavaScript obviously was Meteor, and I loved Meteor, and I used it up until the point where they pulled it from my cold dead hands, basically to the point where the build tool just, it showed its age and it just could not continue. It was kind of falling behind in a lot of ways. I actually think Meteor just had a big V3 release too, so shout out to the Meteor folks for getting that out. But I've always been a big fan of the batteries included thing. To me, Wes, I think one of the biggest things about batteries included that this community has a hard time with is including a database for some reason. And that's something Gatsby never even, never branched into because it was all, bringing your APIs from here and there. But if you have a specific database technology, and it doesn't have to be database itself, it can be the ORM layer. If you have that ORM layer tied directly to the framework, a la Laravel, a la Rails, or a la even WordPress, right? WordPress, you can select which database you're using, which type of database you're using, but the interface in which you're interfacing with that database always stays the same. So to me, if we could all just pick a ORM and tie it really tightly to the rest of the framework, then that to me solves so many issues. Auth. You could easily have auth in that situation. In fact, I'm not going to act like I'm building something crazy here, but I did build my own auth, and I'm moving it into a package, and I have a starter kit that I have in a package, and I have a component library and a CSS thing. I'm putting all this stuff together because I like batteries included. So for me, I see it as like people just got to decide on things. And I think a lot of frameworks would really benefit from having an official ORM solution that is tightly integrated into it, whether or not that's their own ORM or what. You could adapt Drizzle and have it be built into the framework and have it work well. And then you could include auth and all that stuff in there. And I think we'd all benefit from it.
So my question to you is, why are people not using Redwood, Strappy, Keystone, all of these things that have said, all right, well, we will make Rails for JavaScript?
Yeah, that's a good
because we want to bring our own things.
We want to bring our own things. I had fallen into that trap because, yes, I agree with you there, but then I want to use Svelte, right? I want to use my stuff. I want to use my templating language. Redwood, if you could bring your own stuff, I don't know. It's so tough for me because, I agree with that. I just personally, those aren't the choices that I'm making, so I'm not going to use it. But I do think those things are totally underutilized in terms of the value that they do bring. Sails, Redwood JS, there's Blitz, and there's a whole bunch of these that have tried to do this. And the only one to me that really felt like it was easy was Meteor. And the reason why people didn't stay with Meteor is because it makes you use Mongo by default. And they never figured out how to bring it to other database technologies. I think if they would have figured that out, it would have been a different story for Meteor in the long term.
Yeah, well, maybe that's Payload. Payload's using Drizzle now, and it makes enough of a informed choice for you. So we'll see.
Yeah, yes, Payload's cool. Next question here from John. How do you deal with work from home, ADHD, and kids? My wife and I have recently welcomed our first baby and absolutely love him to bits, but I have found 3 months in that my productivity has dropped to near zero. Yeah, 3 months. That's a tough time to be. It takes me a while to lock in, and once I'm in, it's a brittle state. Now with baby in the mix, I've found that I'm working with one eye open and I just cannot get into the flow state. My wife is doing everything for the baby, but since she and baby are always in earshot, every little noise is making me pick up my ears and lose my train of thought. I've tried working with headphones, but my conscience makes me take them off, since I know that 1 minute of my time could be worth 10 minutes of hers, and when she has her hands full with a sleeping or crying baby. Will this go away as I get used to this new chapter in life? Will the baby grow to sleep longer and keep himself entertained? Oh, John, I'm sorry about that sentence, because that's not going to go the way you think it is. Do I accept my fate that I will be distracted? Do I need to be cruel and stay in headphones, keep locked in headphone land? Okay, John, here's the deal. Once the baby starts moving around, it's going to get so much worse. Because when that baby starts moving around, 2 seconds, you look away for 2 dang seconds, that baby's into something, or that baby's gone. That's like the craziest thing ever, is when they first start to move, they are just all over the place, and it makes it so much harder than it is at this very second. So unfortunately, John, it's going to get worse. Now, if you're not doing daycare, which is kind of the solution that we had, was that we did daycare.
Just get rid of the kid.
Oh God.
Well, not like entirely, but for the day.
Yes, for the day. And honestly, you could say what you want about putting your young child in daycare, but I gotta say, now that our kids are in kindergarten and in elementary school, they're so well socially adjusted from daycare, and a lot of their friends from daycare ended up going to the same school. They have friends. Like, there's a lot of positives to daycare, even though it was expensive as hell. But if you can't do that, I would make an agreement with your wife. I need this much time to work. I'm going to put in headphones, and I will make it up to you by giving you that much time, and you can just go off and do whatever. Because the problem is that if you're both being completely taxed by the baby at all times, neither of you are getting that time. And so I think it's important that you both have that time, especially when we first had our kids. My wife and I had an agreement that, like, if either of us wanted to use the gym at any given point, you're watching the kids for an hour or whatever, and the other one just has no problem with it, because we both wanted to give each other that time to just go work out that stress or that energy or any of that stuff. So I would say make an agreement to swap time instead of both being on guard at all times, because that both being on guard at all times is just going to eat away at both your time.
You're both going to get fried. I was talking to my wife about this exact topic recently, and I'll tell you, you will get better at doing things in smaller bursts of time. Like, my wife right now is doing quilting, and she went down to quilt for 12 minutes in between dinner, right before dinner being ready. And she's like, you just have to figure out how to make things doable in short amount bursts of time. And for me, that is really tricky, because I prefer to have my entire day wide open, and I can get so much stuff done, and I can be really focused when there's lots of little things, you got to run to the dentist, and then you have a meeting, and like all of these little things. I find that really hard. And I think one of the biggest skills you can work on is, I have this thing, like, this might even be part of the to-do list that you're working on. Maybe we'll do a productivity episode, is like, figure out what you can focus on, get that one thing done in that short amount of time, because you will never again have those large open bursts of time, which is really frustrating. But like, the people that get things done, the people that are super productive, are the people that have figured out how to chip away and chunk away and be able to eke things out here and there, and not have to do this whole like, all right, I got my coffee, I'm sitting down, same with like learning to code. You hear this from a lot of people, is like, oh, I don't have very much time. And you got to figure out, how do I just take that time and make the most of it?
Yeah. Maybe a small tip here, because we both, have ADHD troubles and stuff like that. A small tip for me that has always worked is to write everything down that you have to do in to-do lists, obviously. But when you do that, you don't need to necessarily sit down and rank all of them in terms of the time it takes. But it's important to look at your to-dos and be able to say, is this a 15-minute ask? Is this a hour-long ask? Like, how much of my time is going to be taken up by this to-do? And then if you know you only have 15, 20 minutes, don't pick up the thing that's going to require an hour's worth of focus and try to chip away at it. Pick up the thing you can just knock out, and that way you're going to be productive on something, and you're actually going to get something done.
We should also say, like, I spent like 2 months absolutely soundproofing my office because I find that external noise of family very distracting. So obviously headphones is a big one. Invest in a nice pair, but go back to episode 516, syntax.fm/516. And we talk a lot about how to actually make things soundproof. Next question we have here is from Trey K. What's up, y'all? The show is goated. Question for both of you. I've heard a few times from the both of you that you're not a fan of CSS modules for scoping styles to components. I'm curious to know as to why not. As far as I know, it's basically the only way to write regular old CSS, and it just works. Unless you're using SCSS, SAS, you don't even need to add any dependencies. Anyways, I'm just curious. Thanks for the content. It's true. So CSS modules, the way that it works is that you have a file, and you'll have a selector in there, like .card. And when you import .card from your CSS into your JavaScript, it will give you a class name, and then those styles will be scoped to it. Why is that not great? That's a great question. I have never felt great about doing that because of the weird where you have to import the class name and apply it to a specific element. And I've just felt it to be kind of clunky. And I don't know if that's a great answer. Maybe now that we have CSS nesting, variables, all of this type of stuff, maybe I should give it another shot. What do you think, Scott?
I agree. You know, for me, when I work in anything that is CSS and JS, the thing that turns me off of CSS and JS solutions is too much of JavaScript. So for instance, like object syntax for CSS, that's something that's always bothered me. But the thing that I don't like about CSS modules is like importing it and then putting the class as an object property and stuff like that. That's too much JavaScript to do CSS. I would infinitely rather use BEM or a class-based scoping system than importing JavaScript to do that. And it's just because it's not transportable for me. I can copy and paste CSS classes left and right, but what I can't copy and paste into projects that aren't using CSS modules or completely different is JavaScript stuff for my CSS. Because, granted, the support for that is there, but I just feel it clunky like you do. I would so much rather just write good old CSS. And, I
think that's what he's saying here is that, like, CSS modules, you're just writing CSS. You're not writing a weird syntax. Yep. You're not writing anything. And you're simply importing a class name to be able to apply it. So if you want to put that in another project, all you have to do is figure out, how do I get this class name onto this div?
Yeah, I just don't like the JavaScript part of it. Like you said, it feels clunky to import that.
Yeah.
And I would just so much rather just write a class for me. And what they're saying about CSS or SCSS, we're fans of SCSS and kind of always have been. But the thing about SCSS is that it's not really that much needed anymore. You know, most of the things that I used from SAS and SCSS, like with the exception of maybe like loops, variables are much better without SCSS.
And they're coming, yeah.
Nesting is in normal CSS. There's so many things that have just completely negated the need for me to use SCSS. So I've always been a fan of it. It's like jQuery, right? It's great. It's fine. It did its job, but we don't need it anymore, really. Yeah.
I'm actually redoing my own personal website, and I'm evaluating a whole bunch of different like CSS ways to move my styled components into something else, and essentially most of my styled components are just regular CSS that are, I'm using styled components just for scoping. And we don't really need that anymore because we have scoping in CSS and there's a lot better options. So CSS modules is one that I am looking at as well. So maybe I'll give it like another try so that right now I'm on Panda CSS, which provides the styled API, but I'm so close to just like writing a code mod or something and switching it over to just regular CSS classes.
These are things that I'm so glad I don't have to worry about, because single file scoped CSS it rules so much harder than any of this stuff. So
just a style tag in the file. That's honestly, it's the best API. That's what Svelte has.
That's why I'm not, that's at the end of the day, Trake. I think it's Trake, by the way, Wes. I think that's why. I think that's why I'm not into it. It's really that I have a better API, and that's what I'm into. Yeah.
Next question we have from The Curious Cat. In your recent episode, 807, both of you mentioned strong support for scope CSS. You stated that Svelte and Vue had out-of-the-box support. How do you do this with React? I've only seen styled components and CSS modules for React. Okay, so this question is really good. How do you do it? Well, CSS now has scoping built in, meaning that you can write a CSS selector like .card, and then inside of that selector, you can nest like a H3 selector where you will style the H3 that's inside of your card, or paragraph tags that are inside of it. So that just has to do with how you are loading in your CSS for React. And like most things in React, there are millions of different approaches to this type of thing. So Panda CSS is a good one. Panda CSS has like 3 different APIs for working with it, which is pretty nifty. So you can write it as if you were writing an object. You can write it as if it were just regular CSS. And you can write it as if it were like properties, like props on a component, because they have a nice one built in. Obviously, CSS modules is an approach that you can take. With Vite, you can simply just import the CSS and it will do the compile, as long as you have the post CSS nesting plugin turned on, meaning that all of your post CSS, your nesting will then be transpiled back to browsers that do not support it, which let's take a look at the can I use for nesting. CSS nesting is in Safari as of May 2023, so just over a year ago.
Yep.
So it's pretty new. It only hit Chrome in December 2023. So like we're not even a year of having this stuff in most of the browsers. So you're still going to need to support older browsers. Thankfully, it's a very easy thing to transpile and to make back to IE6 if you really wanted to.
Yeah. So I mean, to answer the question, I think like we said in the last one, because this question is so related, is just that CSS modules is probably the way to go if you want to write straight up CSS in terms of getting that scoping in here. Next question from Wim Talls. Any tips on reducing JS bundle size? My React app is 3 megabytes of JS and the vendor bundle is another 4 megabytes. We have about 14,000 JS files, or 1,400 JS files. Currently, we have the Terser plugin for Webpack, but this still seems huge. Appreciate your thoughts. Wim Talls, this can happen when you're using just a lot of dependencies and you bring in one here or there. Okay, I need animation. I'll bring in this library. I need a to-do box or whatever, a combo box. I need a search box. I need this or that. Bring in this here and there. Next thing you know, each of those has brought along its own, host of code, or they're not tiny dependencies to begin with. I use bundle phobia quite a bit to scope out my dependencies before I bring them in, just because it's important to know what you're bringing into your project from the start. And I don't think it's a bad idea to check before you bring something in just exactly what it's adding to your project entirely, because seriously, you could bring something in that feels innocuous or small or whatever, and next thing you know, you're just adding a ton of stuff, little things here and there. So one thing you can do is look through your project, scope out bundle sizes, see which are your biggest offenders, and then find smaller ways to fix that. Whether it is, replacing libraries with things that are using browser APIs instead of this or that, so that way you're having to utilize less JavaScript from a third party is always a big thing. If you can do that, and just first, before you fix the problem, you gotta find where the trouble is. What exactly is causing so much just entirely like space-saving measures for you. And there's a handful of plugins specifically for Webpack. You'll have to look this up because I don't know any offhand. I haven't used Webpack, but I know there's a handful of plugins for Webpack that, like Daisy Disk or something like that, they visualize all of your packages that are taking up space. Maybe we can take a second to find some of those.
I got it here. So you need Webpack Bundle Analyzer. And what that does is it gives you a full graph of what packages are taking up space. And I bet right now you are importing some sort of package that is not being properly tree shaken, meaning that you're probably using one method from like a Lodash or something, and your Webpack is not properly throwing the rest of those methods out the door. So you take a look at Bundle Analyzer and it will tell you, oh, this is taking up 300 megs. Because you're telling us that, what did it say here? Your vendor bundle is 4 megs and you have another 3 megs of your own custom JS. That's massive. 1,400 JavaScript files. You probably have an SVG importing. We had like 130K or 200K. I think it was like 600K of an SVG.
Big old SVG. It's my fault.
On the syntax site, there's probably some silly things that you're like, oh my goodness, that's probably 20% of our problem right here. So Bundle Analyzer will get you a lot of the way. Once you have Bundle Analyzer, you're going to figure out, is my tree shaking not set up properly? Can I be using the ESM version of a package? In a lot of cases, people just npm install something and it's not using the new ESM version of the package. Lodash is a good example of that, where Webpack still can tree shake common JS code, but it is much better at tree shaking ESM modules or ECMAScript module code. And you'll probably find quite a bit of stuff. And then also like your framework, can you lazy load stuff? Like on the Syntax website, we don't load every single thing on the homepage. We have CodeCov, and it will tell us that we have 2.9 megs of client-side JavaScript, but that doesn't mean we load 2.9 megs of client-side JavaScript on the syntax.fm. Svelte just lazy loads in what it needs. It knows what we need given what components are on that page.
Yeah. And like that, we said, full disclosure, CodeCov is a Sentry product, but CodeCov does have JavaScript bundle analysis on PRs. So we have this in ours. If I'm trying to merge something into the repo, it will tell us what it's doing to the final bundle size for us. And even if that isn't what's being loaded for each user individually, what we're able to see is I just brought in a whole bunch of JavaScript and maybe that was by accident. And maybe I didn't intend on doing that. Or maybe I did intend on it and there's another way I can take a look at it. But or maybe other people on your team can see that what's going on and you can dive into it a little bit more. So I would look into that CodeCov bundle analysis because it's a nice tool. But again, that is a Sentry product, so I don't want to feel like we're hawking our stuff here. But I feel like that Dave Ramsey show, we're going to get him the CodeCov bundle analysis. We're going to, no.
We'll set you up. You hang on the line. We'll take care of you. It's guaranteed you have some strings package in there. I've done it a million times with emoji packages where it ships a description of every single emoji thing. I've done it
Icon
with
fonts,
Slugify fonts. Man, there's probably a whole bunch of, I can't believe that's what we were actually shipping at the end of the day.
And let me tell you, Wim, I think you're going to really enjoy this hunt because me personally, I will. This is the type of thing I will bore the life out of my wife with. I shaved off 100 megabits off my bundle, and my wife is just like, did you do that last week? Yes, but it's so good this week.
Next question we have here is from Big Green Egg. Hi, Wes and Scott, longtime listener. I follow you since before Syntax, and there is one thing I've been wondering about for a while. It relates not just to you, but all podcasters, YouTube course makers in our industry. I've been hesitant to ask this because I think it could be taken the wrong way, but I assure you this is honest curiosity from my side. My question is, do you still do contract work, day-to-day development for customers anymore? I know both of you building lots of demos. Scott is constantly updating and changing his own platform, and I believe Wes is still working on courses. But I do feel like the kind of development you do day-to-day is disconnected to the employer, random company, day-to-day work that your listeners might do. Thanks a lot, Big Green Egg. Absolutely. This is my biggest fear is to become the teacher that does not know what they're talking about. And you do see this a lot where people will post up little examples or like talk about solutions. And it's like, well, you haven't actually hit the like real world problems and the nitty gritty of this type of stuff that you hit. So I have my own course platform that I have worked on for 10 years. It is fairly large. It does quite a bit from e-commerce to affiliates to auth and user accounts and databases and video streaming, all of that type of stuff. And that's a fairly large product that I'm working on. So I don't feel that I'm not hitting any issues. And the areas of things that we do not hit, like for example, I have never used queues in my application. So what do? We have people on that do hit those types of problems and ask lots of really good questions about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing is that when I try to work on things or even demos or whatever, I'm trying to work on real world stuff. So I'm often building apps that have users, that have people actually experiencing the stuff. And I'm shipping products. I'm not necessarily just shipping demos, definitely shipping products. And I think that's a big thing. Now, that isn't the same thing as working on a large team and a big project, pushing code to stuff. That's not the same as working at an agency where you're maybe hucking out sites as fast as you can. But I have a lot of experience doing that. And I tend to think about that a lot when I'm working in terms of like, what would this be like today if I was still doing agency life? Would I still use the same tools? What tools would I use? How would I approach these things? And another thing is I do try to work on projects with other people. The Syntax site is non-trivial, and we have 3 developers plus open source stuff going, people in the community working on it. So we have a lot of the challenges of working on a long running big team project there in terms of continuous development, how we're testing, how we have our, our general flow of making sure code comes in and it doesn't break things. So I think we do hit those problems, and we are still working on software enough that I would say, maybe even like 70% of my day is filled with writing software still, which is how I want it to be, right?
Yeah.
All right, next question from Jorgen. I'm building a website that revolves around a map. Is there any way to make maps local first? Oh gosh, maps local first. I don't see a way that would work. I have not tried. I'm going to say this, Jorgen, up front. I have not tried to ever do maps local first. I think the thing about local first isn't that your applications will always be able to function entirely offline, because maps, that's a lot of data. And the things that you could have local in your map application is the data that is then used in the map. Locations, longitude, latitude to save, so that way when the map loads, that information isn't having to be pulled from a third-party database or things like that. So it's a great question. I don't know. Yeah, I think even like, hey, if you turned off your network completely, would Apple Maps even load on your phone?
It will. And like that's a huge one, because I remember, as someone who lives in Canada, what we used to always do is you would go to Google Maps before you go on a trip, and you would go to where you're staying.
Download it, yeah.
And you would download the offline maps, because you wouldn't have cell service. And now you have data. And it's not a big deal, but that was a big thing for a while. So you absolutely can do this, but I don't know if it's like local first, but it is what it's called is offline maps. So a mapping application, when you have it, and this might not be Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, but there are lots of other JavaScript mapping applications that you can use. There's ArcGIS, there's OpenStreetMaps, there's a whole bunch of them out there. And when you have a map, it's called a layer, and those layers are comprised of a whole bunch of tiles and pins that you sort of drop on the map. And those pins, like Scott said, you can save all of that data locally to the browser, no problem. And the tiles are either going to be images that can be saved to the browser, or it's going to be like vector data. If you're doing like a vector map instead of images, like you haven't seen that in a while, where you pan around on a map and it like takes a second to load in a square. Mm-hmm. That's because a lot of these mapping softwares are using vector data. So all of that can be saved locally, and you can, as you're panning around, you can save that data to the browser, no problem. And it's just about building in some sort of thing where when you pan to a spot, or you say, hey, download all the mapping data for all of the zooms for each of these areas. So you totally can do it. It's just a matter of, is that worth it? Because you're getting into some pretty custom mapping versus just a Google Maps where you can pop a few pins on the API.
Yeah. That's a tough one for sure.
Next question from John. Thanks for a great show. Long-time listener. I don't mean any offense, but I'm here to ask Wes to say schema and specificity. It just makes my day every time I hear it. I did not realize I was saying schema wrong. Schema? I asked on Twitter how I'm saying this wrong, and it's schema. Like
I'm going skiing, ma.
Schema. Yeah, I'm going schema, not schema, which apparently I've been saying, but schema. Well, why is there an H in it?
I don't. Yeah, don't know.
Schema. No, I think you guys are wrong.
Okay.
Schema. All right, next one.
Next question from Tim Wrinkle. Are developers actually or still using the time tag in HTML? It seems like it was all the rage a few years ago, but I haven't heard anyone mention it in a long time. Yeah, people are using the time tag, and you should use the time tag as well. Time is just to specify a time, and you give it a date time attribute, and you give it a string of the date time, or you give it the time itself. And these things are good. I think this is what developers need to have in their HTML when we're talking about semantic HTML. But the time tag specifically, it can take just a string like a date, and it can give that string context to an actual date stamp, where if you just type in the words inside of a paragraph tag, March 1st, that means nothing to the browser. But if you wrap that in a time with a date time and you give it a timestamp, that knows that is a specific date and time. So I would say developers should be, if they're not using this time tag, because it makes sense to do so. If
you have like a blog post like posted 20 minutes ago, that's a great primitive to build on top of for like a tooltip. You hover over top of 20 minutes ago and you'll be able to see, for some reason, the time tag does not give you a tooltip by default in the browser, which I would really like, right? You probably would also have to pass it a title if you wanted that type of thing, but it's also great for Google to know when things were specifically done. We're open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Yes.
And you can explicitly pass the year, month, day. You pass it a whole time string tag. I had it on my website for quite a while where my about page, I would say, I live in Hamilton with one kid. And then I would cross that out. And then I would put 2 kids. And then when I crossed out the one kid, I would put a time tag in there.
Oh, that's fun.
That stated when I moved from 1 kid to 2 kids, And like, I don't know if anyone ever found that little bit of information, but I do find when you are posting data for time, it's so nice to give the whole timestamp. Like even we had a quick meeting about the basketball thing we did yesterday. And they said, all right, well, like it's starting at 3:00. And I was just like, at 3:00, what time zone? You know, the time zone thing always drives me mad. And like, wouldn't it be nice to be able to hover over top of that and to see the entire timestamp string? I think it would.
I totally agree with you.
Next question from Matt Lynch, episode 810. Where did Wes get his replacement ear cups for his Bose QC35 headphones? They look really cool. Why, thank you. I've had these headphones for probably like 10 years, and I've replaced the ear cups on them probably 6-7 times. And I usually just go on a hunt looking for cool ones. So my places to look are Wicked Cushions, which is like a website with lots of different replacement cushions. They're really comfortable. I also will check on Amazon and AliExpress. I found this pair on AliExpress, and they've been going hard for probably about a year now. I did once get a pair of like tonal black camouflage ones, and everybody thought that it was just peeling because they were dirty, like black and gray. It just looked like they were dirty and peeling. And I thought they looked so cool. But like when you're on a video, everyone thought they were just gross and peeling. So be careful about that. But yeah, it's kind of fun. I also have the QC 700s here, and they do not sell cool replacements for these, which is kind of a bummer because I like to freshen it up.
These are my fancy headphones. The problem with mine is I got open back, so I can only really use them in my office. I can't take them anywhere.
Oh, yeah. And you can't use them for recording either because then I hear myself.
That's exactly right. But you know, folks, I have a one ear in as an AirPod. That's how I hear. What's actually really cool about these headphones, Wes, is that, you know, these come out so that you can...
And for audio listeners, Scott, what kind of headphones are these?
They're Audi's. I don't know what the exact model is, but what I'm showing is that each of the headphones has their own 1/8 adapter in, but both of the adapters are stereo. So it doesn't matter which one you plug into which one. You're never having to plug the left one into the left ear and the right one into the left ear. And for somebody like me, that's really nice. All right, next question from Dylan. Dylan in Arlington. I want to migrate every team at my company to use the same ESLint rules. The auto fixes are easy, but what about everything else? The first repo I'm investigating has over 8,300 previously undetected errors.
I've been there. I think I even beat that between ESLint and TypeScript errors.
Yeah, I converted. I converted an entire application that was like a 6-year project that had been through several rewrites to TypeScript. So I'm no newbie to, but 8,300 errors. That's so many. One example is that over 1,000 of these are React hook related, probably because our repo never had the React hook ESLint plugin. I don't want to disable the hook rules, but that would mean we'd ignore them in future code as well. I don't want to make them warnings because there'd be so many warnings that new warnings and errors would be impossible to discover. That is all good reasoning. I don't want to add ESLint disable next line rule by hand because there's too many errors. Are there tools to help with this? I'm considering write errors to a JSON file, write an ESLint plugin or code mod that uses a JSON file to add ESLint disable next line 8,000 locations, then add a counter for how many ESLint disables are in the repo and treating it like code coverage for each build. If a developer adds more ESLint disables, then they get an X. The goal is to reduce that number. But I'd rather much use community-supported solution than build my own. Thank you for the podcast. I've been listening since 2017. Holy cow, that's a lot of errors. So, man, I think for me, you know, this isn't the way you should handle this. For me, I would spend a week and I would fix all 8,000 of those, and I would not sleep until I did. 8,000's too many to have. What I don't necessarily see is a lot of these should be automatically fixable, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of ESLint errors are things that ESLint can automatically fix for you. Not all the time, but but 8,000, what could 8,000 ESLint errors be? Especially 1,000 React hook errors? Like, what are you doing with your hooks?
I guarantee what's happening is
arrays?
They have, it's the dependency array. Guarantee
but those are
that's
easy
what
to
it
fix.
is.
Those are so easy to fix.
Not all the time. That dependency one is really tricky sometimes because you have to pass in the dependency, which may not be part of the scope. It can get a little bit hairy, but in most cases, you're right. It's simply just adding it to the dependency. And with a lot of these, like 8,300, sometimes you can just do a quick little code mod or a find and replace, and you go, oh, that brought it down to 5,000. Like it's all the same. Or like, I used this variable 400 times and they're all underscores, and we should change that to camel case. So it's probably not that scary, but I don't think that writing a code mod to turn them off and then writing a new like linter to figure out how many disables you have, because
no thanks. Yeah.
Just like failing tests or code coverage, it's fine to have failing linting errors. What I would do is turn on linting only for new files, meaning that whenever somebody touches a file, now you have to now lint that. Or sorry, you turn it on only for changed files, not new files. And that means that's what I did for quite a while, is anytime I touch a file, I must go and do that migration. And then at a certain point, I said, you know what? I'm hitting the same patterns over and over again. I'm just going to YOLO go for it and move everything on over. But I would certainly not write a disabler that just disables it, and then you have to count how many disables you have, because that's just a whole nother level of failing tests that you're keeping track of.
I think you're totally right. And sometimes, like you said, Wes, you run into a situation where I'm now changing this file. I'm unable to push updates with this file until I fix all of the errors in this specific file. And sometimes you fix one error in that file, like you mentioned, and it will knock out 1,000 of your ESLint rules elsewhere because it's a find and replace throughout your application. I've done large fixes like this, but I think it's important to get you down to zero only if you value that tool, which I think you should value that tool. And in that regard, it wouldn't be possible for your whole team to just do a sprint and everybody take it on and pick different sections of the apps and just crush it and knock it out. Like, I know it's a lot, and I know that not everybody is afforded that time, but I think at some point you need to focus on really getting that down, like really focus on it.
And the other thing about like using disable is that like disable's there for a reason. Sometimes you're going to want to just disable it. And sometimes you're not going to want to, like if you're changing the code just to satisfy the linter and that code was working fine, now you're just introducing code touches where something might break, just to satisfy. It's the same thing sometimes with like writing extra TypeScript that adds extra code. I've done this in the past, but I stop myself and be like, why am I writing more JavaScript purely to satisfy the TypeScript type checker? It can be a little bit hairy. So sometimes the ignore is there for good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then once you start to add ignore for things that you actually don't want to ignore, that, like you said, it clouds the water or clouds the air. I don't know what the saying is there, but it makes it cloudy, and you don't want to make things cloudy. You want to have a nice visible 8,000 error so that you know what to fix. So good luck to you, Dylan. I think you got to do something about it, because 8,000 errors, you might as well not even be using ESLint at that point, right? So cool. Well, that was awesome. We had so many good questions. In fact, so many that we couldn't even get to them all. So if you're out there and you want to add your own question to the next potluck, head on over to syntax.fm and sign up. There's a little ask a question in the top there. You can ask a question, get your question on the show. And if we didn't read your question, it doesn't mean it's not good. We had so many good ones this week. And in fact, I think we might need to double up one of these, just because I felt like we could have had a whole nother episode about all the good questions this week. So again, add your questions if you want to get them answered on the show, and we'll do our very best to make sure that your question gets on the show. Now it's the part of the show where we get into I almost said schick picks. I did a little schema, a little schick picks and shameless plugs here. Wes, do you have a sick pick for us today?
I do. It's another TV show. We've been watching a lot of TV shows recently.
Look at you.
Just because of the new baby.
Yeah.
And man, Clarkson's Farm, which is
Never heard of it.
Jeremy Clarkson is the Top Gear guy. You're familiar with him?
Familiar with Jeremy? Yeah.
Yeah, I never watched Top Gear because I'm not super into cars or anything like that. But we decided to give it a go. There's 3 seasons of it, and basically he bought this farm in Chipping Norton, which is kind of part of the somewhere in the UK. I'm sure our UK people are cringing right now, but he has goats and he has dogs and he's planting crops and he has pigs, and it's really interesting to see him go through the farm. And it is one of the most real shows I think I've ever watched, meaning that him and his wife are doing the work, and he's not just hopping on a tractor doing the shot and then having some guy come in and finish it, but like he has employees that are like part of the area, and you can see that like he's actually doing the work and he's really involved and actually understands how all of this stuff works, which is it's so good and it's so interesting. And it's also, like, I didn't know a whole bunch about the UK countryside, and it seems really beautiful, and I really like learning more about that. So check it out. It's called Clarkson's Farm. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's a fantastic... we have one more episode tonight, and I'm a little sad that it's going to be over after this because we've been binging it for a couple weeks now.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I'm going to pick an Allen wrench set. These things there's so many of these on Amazon. You can find a billion of them. But the thing about Allen wrenches is that when you get 1,000 of those little ones and you just have them around and you're like, oh, let me just pick the one and try it until it works. Man, that's so annoying. So,
and you lose one and the whole set is garbage.
Yeah. Anytime you have to pull them out, you're going to lose an Allen wrench. So
yeah.
This is the first time I've bought one of these. I like to have these around just because. But this, what I got is this Mulwark, which who knows if that's a real brand or drop shipped, whatever. Mulwark. I would imagine this is drop shipped. You can probably find these elsewhere for cheaper, but it's only $16 on Amazon, and it's a 2-piece where you get both the standard SAE and the metric of every single size of an Allen wrench inside of a little like foldable thing. Yeah. And the nice thing about them being foldable and it pops out is that you then get a nice big old handle to crank on it with. So yeah, if you have
can't lose them.
little itty bitty handle and you're trying to do your Allen wrench, then that sucks. Nobody likes to do that. Your fingers get all hurt. This thing's cranking on it. So get one of these Allen wrenches if you're using Allen wrenches for anything. Yeah.
I have many sets of these, and I will say one further and recommend you get a 3-piece set that also has Torx, security Torx, because the amount of times you need a really weird Torx, like we were installing a Tesla charger at the cottage the other day, and the Tesla charger has this bizarre security Torx on it, and the electrician was like, "What the hell is this?" Yeah. You know? And I was like, "Hold on, buddy, I have all of the weird security bits, but I just found a regular Torx one, and that the amount of times it's come in handy. I can't recommend getting a nice set of Allen wrenches enough. And even I have them for impact too, so you can put them in the drill.
Yes.
If you're ever installing IKEA stuff, you can. Yes. It's like Formula One.
Yeah, I know. I had to do so much of that stuff, whether it's kids' furniture lately or whatever. You know, our kids are going from cribs to beds to bookshelves and all that stuff. So it's like I've been building furniture, that kind of stuff.
So good. I'll also recommend getting a set of T-handle Allen keys. I'm very passionate about Allen keys here.
Yeah, I got some of those.
But the T-handle ones where you get a whole set and then they come out, that can be really handy for if you have to get into a weird spot, especially the ones that have a ball end. You can insert them on an angle and still use it.
Word.
But
yeah.
I love tools.
You know what I need, Wes? I need like a tool bench box tool. Like I have a tool box, right? But like I just toss everything in there and it's a total mess. So like I need a system.
Yeah. You got to like a pegboard or like a slat wall or something like that. I got rid of all my toolboxes and I just have everything hanging on the wall. And then I have
even
one
the little
bag
pieces?
Sorry?
Even all like the little pieces, you got little screwdrivers here and there. You get everything on the peg wall.
Oh, yeah. Well, for screwdrivers, I just made a long board and drilled like 1,000 holes in it. And then all the screwdrivers slot through.
Yeah.
And it's nice because you can look at the bottom and look at the tips for what the kind of the one that you're looking for.
When I was at your house, I did see your magnificent tool room, and I wish it made me briefly consider moving my tools into the basement. We don't necessarily have the room for it, but I keep mine in the garage, and I just don't have like I don't have a good space. There's like all sorts of old stuff in there from the previous owners, and what I really need is just either to build a little workshop table or something. I gotta have something.
Yeah, tiny, like a shallow little table with a big pegboard where you can hang everything. Because if I can't see it, it's gone. I'll buy a new one. So, oh, awesome! That's why I have 47 different Allen key things, and they're all missing one.
Yeah, they're all missing one.
Oh, man. All right. Thanks, everybody, so much for tuning in. Make sure you check us out at syntax.fm. We're on YouTube. We're on all of the platforms out there. Leave us a comment. We love to hear it, and keep submitting your Potluck questions at syntax.fm.
Sick.
Peace.
Peace.